Let me make something absolutely clear from the start, because there has been a lot of bad faith distortion around this issue. I never said Jeffrey Epstein didn't traffic other people. I never said there weren't other women, and I never said there weren't other victims. What I said very clearly is that we are dealing with a specific investigative record. That record comes from 2006, 2007, and 2008. It comes from the search warrants issued during that period, and it comes from the evidence gathered under those warrants. That is the universe we are working within, nothing more, nothing less. And when people try to expand the scope without producing additional evidence, they're not advancing the investigation. They're muddying it. Because here's the real question, the one no one in power wants to answer. Have you released everything? Not selectively, not strategically, not what's convenient. Everything. Let's walk through the exchange that exposed this contradiction in real time. A member of Congress asked the most basic question imaginable. Have you released all the materials the FBI seized from Epstein's properties? The computers, the hard drives, the emails, the file cabinets, the documents, the financial records, the response. Everything the court has allowed us to release. That sounds reassuring until you ask the obvious follow-up. Which court? Because here's the problem. Multiple federal courts have already ruled on this issue, and they've made something very clear. The evidence held by the FBI is not governed by those court orders in the way being implied. In other words, you're hiding behind restrictions that don't actually apply. So the question gets sharper. Do you have any legal justification, any statute, any binding order that prevents full disclosure of the evidence you personally control? And instead of an answer, we get deflection. Do you want me to break a federal judge's order? No. What people want is for you to follow your own words. Because you said on the record that the Epstein materials were under the direct control of the FBI director. You said you went to court. You said everything under your control would be released. And yet what we're seeing isn't transparency. It's drips. It's fragments. It's selective disclosure timed to public pressure. So the question becomes unavoidable. If you promise full release, why are you still holding back the full file? And that brings us to the second half of this story. Because while the Epstein files are being slow-walked, something else is happening inside the FBI that is far more dangerous. The Patel problem, Kash Patel, is in serious trouble. Not hypothetically, not politically, legally. And what makes this situation remarkable is that he hasn't been arrested, he hasn't been charged, and there is no warrant for his arrest yet. But the groundwork for criminal exposure is being laid right now. In sworn federal court filings by people who used to run the FBI itself. Multiple former senior FBI officials have submitted detailed sworn testimony stating that Patel admitted privately that he knew what he was doing was illegal, but did it anyway to keep Donald Trump happy. Let that sink in. This isn't anonymous sourcing. This isn't cable news speculation. This is testimony under oath. Former top FBI leaders are putting their names, reputations, and careers on the line to say the same thing. That Patel told them he was firing agents who worked on Trump investigations. That he knew it likely violated federal law, and that he believed his own job depended on carrying out this purge. That's not politics. That's evidence. The lawsuit that changes everything in September 2025, 3 former senior FBI officials, including former acting director Brian Driscoll, file a federal lawsuit against Patel. These are not disgruntled employees. These are not partisans. These are people who ran the bureau. According to their sworn complaint, Patel told Driscoll directly that Trump had not forgotten that the FBI tried to put him in jail and that Patel's continued employment depended on removing anyone associated with those investigations. If that's true, and it's alleged under oath, that's not just unethical. That's retaliation. That's abuse of power. That's a direct violation of federal civil service protections designed to keep law enforcement independent from political interference. And it gets worse. According to reporting corroborated by multiple outlets, Patel allegedly acknowledged that firing agents solely for working Trump cases would likely be unlawful. He knew it, he said it, and he did it anyway. That's what prosecutors call consciousness of guilt. You don't have to prove he should have known. You prove he did know. And when you combine that admission with the actual firings that followed, you're no longer talking about a gray area. You're talking about potential criminal exposure. By the time the lawsuits hit federal court, the issue was no longer theoretical. It wasn't about speculation or media narratives. It was about sworn testimony, documented actions, and a pattern that was becoming impossible to explain away as coincidence. Because once you strip away the talking points, the core allegation against Kash Patel is devastatingly simple. He used the authority of the FBI director's office to retaliate against career law enforcement officials for doing their job, specifically for investigating Donald Trump. That's it. That's the case. And everything else, every document, every deposition, every public contradiction either reinforces or fails to disprove that central claim. Who was fired and why that matters? According to court filings, congressional documents, and corroborating reporting, the agents and officials targeted under Patel's leadership were not random. They weren't underperformers. They weren't accused of misconduct. They weren't marginal employees nearing retirement. They were people who worked on January 6th investigations, the classified documents case, Trump-related financial probes, other matters Trump had publicly labeled a witch hunt. That detail matters because federal civil service law is explicit. You cannot fire or discipline federal employees for engaging in lawful investigative activity, especially when that activity involves politically sensitive cases. That protection exists for one reason: to prevent exactly this scenario. Law enforcement cannot function if agents are forced to calculate whether doing their jobs will cost them their careers based on who holds power. And yet, according to sworn testimony, that is precisely the environment Patel created. I know it's probably illegal. This is where Patel's situation becomes uniquely dangerous. According to multiple former FBI officials, Patel didn't just order the firings. He allegedly acknowledged in private conversations that firing agents for their involvement in Trump cases would likely be unlawful. Read that again. Not might be controversial, not could be challenged, likely unlawful. And then he did it anyway. Why? Because according to those same officials, Patel believed his own job depended on demonstrating loyalty to Trump and purging anyone associated with investigations Trump presented. From a legal standpoint, this is catastrophic. One of the hardest things for prosecutors to prove in white-collar or abuse of power cases is intent. Did the defendant know their conduct was illegal? Here, witnesses are saying Patel admitted he did. That's not negligence. That's not a mistake. That's conscious violation. The second lawsuit and the loyalty test. Then comes the December 2025 lawsuit. This one is filed by more than a dozen FBI agents who were terminated after kneeling during racial justice protests in 2020 or being labeled disloyal or woke. Their claim is straightforward. The FBI under Patel implemented an ideological loyalty test. If you were perceived as insufficiently aligned with Trump or insufficiently hostile to Trump's perceived enemies, you were expendable. The lawsuit names Patel, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and the Department of Justice, and it introduces a piece of evidence that Patel's defenders can't dismiss. Patel's own book, When Your Own Book Becomes Exhibit A Before Becoming FBI Director, Kash Patel published a book titled Government Gangsters. In it, he argues that career federal employees constitute a deep state undermining conservative presidents. He calls for a purge. He frames loyalty to elected leadership as a moral imperative and paints institutional independence as sabotage. At the time, it was marketed as ideology. Now it reads like a blueprint. The fired agents' lawyers are using Patel's own words to argue premeditation, that this wasn't about performance or restructuring, but about executing a long-standing political agenda. And from an evidentiary standpoint, that's devastating. Because when someone writes down their intent, then later acts in ways that mirror that intent, it becomes incredibly difficult to argue coincidence. Patel didn't just do the thing. He explained why he wanted to do the thing. Then he did it. The confirmation hearing trap. Now we get to the perjury problem. During Patel's confirmation hearing, senators asked him directly whether he would retaliate against agents involved in Trump investigations. His answer, according to the record, was clear. He said he would not. He said he understood the importance of FBI independence. He said he would follow the law. Those statements were made under oath. Fast forward to now. You have multiple former senior FBI officials saying, also under oath, that Patel told them the exact opposite in private, that he was firing people because they worked Trump cases, that he believed it was unlawful, that he felt compelled to do it anyway. If those allegations are true, then Patel didn't just abuse his power, he lied to Congress. And lying to Congress, especially during a confirmation hearing, is not a political scandal. It's a federal crime. Why this case doesn't die with Trump right now? Patel's shield is political. As long as Trump controls the Justice Department, Patel is unlikely to face prosecution. Attorney General Pam Bondi is not going to greenlight charges against Trump's FBI director for carrying out Trump's agenda. But that protection is temporary. What makes Patel's situation uniquely precarious is that the evidence against him is being preserved in real time. Court filings, depositions, sworn statements, congressional records. This isn't an investigation that fades with time. It hardens. If political control shifts, if Democrats take Congress, or if a future administration assumes control of DOJ, this case is ready-made. The elements are already there. Knowledge of illegality, overtax, retaliatory motive, false statements under oath, documentary corroboration. Cases like this don't need to be invented. They just need permission to proceed. The pattern Trump always follows. There's another reason Patel should be worried. Trump has a long, well-documented pattern with enforcers. He demands loyalty. He pushes people to do legally questionable things, and when consequences arrive, he distances himself. Michael Cohen went to prison. Lawyers in Georgia flipped. Advisors took the fall. Trump survives by letting others absorb the damage. Patel is not immune to that pattern. In fact, he fits it perfectly. He's the instrument, the one who carried out the purge, who signed the orders, who spoke to subordinates, who left a paper trail. If Patel becomes a liability rather than an asset, there is no reason to believe Trump will protect him. Why this matters beyond Patel. This isn't just about one man. If Patel is ultimately charged, investigated, or even forced out, it sends a message to every political appointee watching closely. Loyalty to Trump is not a legal defense. Following unlawful orders does not immunize you. Writing down your intentions makes prosecution easier, not harder. The irony here is almost too perfect. Patel wrote a book accusing others of being government gangsters. Now his own words are being used to argue that he turned the FBI into a political weapon. If nothing else, this moment exposes the real cost of politicizing law enforcement. Because once you cross that line, the institution doesn't protect you. The politics don't protect you. And the person you did it for certainly won't. What remains is the record. And the record increasingly is not in Patel's favor. This story isn't finished. It's still unfolding. But the foundation for accountability, real accountability, is already in place. And when the political shield disappears, what's left is the evidence. That's the part no press conference can erase. At the center of both stories, the Epstein files and the Patel purge, is the same unresolved question: who controls the record? In the Epstein case, we are told transparency has been achieved, while entire categories of evidence remain unseen. The FBI claims compliance while invoking restrictions that do not clearly apply. The public is asked to trust a process that refuses to show its work. In the Patel case, we see the opposite problem. The record is overflowing. Sworn testimony, court filings, public statements, a published book, confirmation hearing transcripts. Too much evidence, not too little. One case raises suspicion because information is withheld. The other raises danger because the information is already locked in place, and both expose the same institutional failure: power being exercised without accountability. Kash Patel's risk is not political backlash, it's permanence. You can spin a press conference, you can delay a disclosure, you can survive one news cycle. You cannot outrun sworn testimony. Every firing, every admission, every contradiction is now part of a fixed record. It doesn't disappear when the headlines move on. It waits. And history shows that these cases don't resolve when the political climate is favorable to the people involved. They resolve when it isn't. That's the mistake people keep making, confusing control with immunity. The Epstein files will eventually be released in full, either by choice or by force. And when they are, they will answer questions that have been deferred for years. The Patel record is already complete. What remains is whether anyone is willing or able to act on it. Because institutions can bend for a while, they can stall, they can protect their own. But they cannot erase what has been sworn, written, and filed. And in the end, the record doesn't care who was powerful at the time. It only cares what can be proven.